was my first time getting laid off, I realized that you have to be the one in control of your career. And so after that, I actually
Today on Time We Discuss, I have Alice Ye with me. Alice, thank you for joining me today.
thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So, Alice, you are a career clarity coach. I am super excited to hear what this is all about. I have no idea, but fortunately you do. So, how about you tell us about it? What does a career clarity coach do?
I help high achieving mid career professionals navigate from feeling stuck at career crossroads to finding clarity on what they want to do next so that they can find personal and professional success and fulfillment. Oftentimes, I think a lot of people seek out career coaches for help and guidance around navigating their careers. And so that's essentially what I do.
When you're first working with a client, what's a typical day like when you first get a new client? How does the intake process work?
It always starts with really understanding what it is that they're struggling with and what their goals are, because that way I know how to guide them towards that goal, and we have a bit of a North Star to work towards. Um, so when it comes to the intake, after we usually have a discovery call or a vision call, as I like to call it, where we really discuss and understand both from a fit perspective if we should be working together. There's, sometimes personalities clash and things like that. So it's a fit for both of us to check that it feels comfortable to work with each other, and we'll dig into the details of the problems or struggles that they're trying to work through, and then also where they want to go. And then from there, the coaching process begins.
Talk to me about when the personalities clash. Do you have a robust network that you can refer people out to other coaches, and then likewise people refer back to you? And how did you go about building that network?
There's definitely a network I have, like a coaches network from coaches that I knew through my certification program, as well as just general networking that I do, where I meet other entrepreneurs and other coaches. So there's definitely other people I can think of if I can't help them. If I can't help clients with a specific problem, I'll try to definitely refer them out to someone that I know.
Let's talk about how you got started. How did you get that first client of yours?
When I first started coaching, I was doing it through my coaching certification program. I needed to get a certain number of hours in order to get my certification. And so that was all done essentially pro bono. And through that, I essentially just put a call out to my network, friends, whoever was interested in being coached. I did that for a couple hours. And part of that was also practice for me, but also, for my friends who had never been coached before, to get that experience. And one of the people that I worked with during that time decided that they wanted to continue working with me on a more formal basis. And so that's how I essentially got my first client.
Recently, I was working on editing a video for Tamara. She is over in Switzerland. Her video actually drops in a few weeks. By the time yours is live, it'll be way in the past. But one of the things we talked about was that, at least over in Europe, there was a bit of a stigma a little bit towards like life coaching. So my question for you, when you're first starting as a coach, did you have to deal with any of that where people are like, wait, you're a what?
Coaching is definitely a new industry and very rapidly growing. There's definitely a lot of coaches online who are promoting their services. And as the industry grows, I do see it transitioning to more and more acceptable. So similar to therapists, a couple of years ago, it was deemed to be shameful to admit that you went to therapy. And now it's much more accepted. Almost everyone goes, as far as I know, as a therapist. And so I do see coaching moving towards that. I think with coaching, probably most people see coaching essentially before like executive coaches or health coaches. But with life coaching, I think that's becoming more and more accepted. And as the industry grows and more people find the benefits of using a coach, I think that stigma will definitely go away. And I think like with therapists or coaches, it's all about finding the right fit and figuring out if the person that you're thinking about working with is actually qualified, Right now, the industry is not quite regulated, so literally anyone can call themselves a coach. So one of the things to look for is whether they have a certification. And that's one of the things to know, that the coach has been certified, they've gone through a training. And so seeing if they have past client testimonials to see how people talk about their experiences working that coach. So yeah, it's about doing your research and figuring out if this coach is able to deliver on what they promise. And that, I think, first call is important to see if it is a right fit for both sides.
When you first start working with a new client, what is the timeline that you typically work with them on? Is it like a 6 month timeline? Is it a 3 month? What does that typically look like?
We start with 2 months, or 8 sessions, really, which can spread out depending on people's schedules. Sometimes we meet every other week, sometimes we meet weekly. I do recommend meeting weekly just to keep building that momentum up in terms of the things you're working on and making that progress. So sometimes that can stretch out a bit, but essentially the things I work on with my clients are focusing on figuring out what their purpose is, to help them understand why they haven't felt fulfilled within their current roles, whether their values are aligned with their work. Oftentimes there's a values misalignment, and that's why people often feel unhappy at work. And the last piece, which is actually one of the most important pieces, is mindset. So thinking about how to keep your confidence up, and making sure you're thinking about the future, and having the right mindset to reach for the goals that you want.
I don't know if these were your exact words or not, but fulfillment with their job or happiness at their job. What are some of the trends that you're seeing with the different clients that walk through your door?
The trends I often see are, and this is something that I dealt with myself as well, which is why I ultimately ended up becoming a career coach, is where that feeling of, for me personally, having been a high achiever, I've you've grown up knowing that you're supposed to follow a specific path: go to a good school, get good grades, get a good job, get a stable, secure, high paying job, and then that's success. So oftentimes we follow that path and we end up in this job that feels successful, but you at your core you feel like something's still missing. You feel like you're still not happy, or something's not quite right. And that's, for me, is where there's probably most likely this lack of feeling of purpose. So feeling like you have find meaning from the work that you do, there's a lack of that. And that's oftentimes because we're not really dialed into what it is that we actually want, and where we feel like we can make the most impact. And that's not being essentially uncovered and leaned on through your work. And then the second area is really around what I mentioned around values misalignment. So oftentimes we're in a role where the work culture doesn't match with your personal values, or you have unfortunately a bad manager, or the things that you value are just not aligned in that role. And so that's the second area where people often are unhappy with their work. And those are usually a bit more obvious, because you can tell when you have a bad manager, or the work environment is not your ideal environment. But with most people, there's often this fear of leaving, leaving your comfort zone, leaving something that you know for the unknown. And so that fear of the unknown often holds them in place. And so that's where with the work that I do with clients, where we focus on purpose to figure out what work feels meaningful to them, with figuring out what makes sense to them in terms of what their values are, to make sure that the opportunities they look for are aligned. And then that last piece around mindset, to make sure that any fears around the uncertainty, or feel of failure, or the fear of starting over, that's often one that I hear a lot. And then, managing those fears.
If someone comes to you and say they've already identified that there's a value misalignment, that maybe at one point in time their values were in alignment with a particular organization, and maybe management changed, mission, vision, values changed or something like that. And all of a sudden there's that misalignment, and they already know that coming to you. So what is the next step after that? Is at that point, okay, well, let's try to figure out an exit strategy. Let's try to find something that does align with your values. And then do you help them like find those organizations? So in short, once they've already determined what that misalignment is, how do you help them from that point?
Oftentimes people know that there's a misalignment, but what is usually missing is what they feel like is a priority within themselves. So one of the things to really figure out is, okay, you know that this doesn't work for you, but what is actually a priority for you? So there's often a lot of times that we're trying to juggle in our heads from obviously salary and pay, recognition versus the company culture versus are there growth opportunities? And there's a few different areas to think about, and oftentimes we only really focus on one, which is usually salary, which is understandable, but sometimes there's an overemphasis on that. So all of these other areas get overlooked. And in terms of the next step of figuring out what is right for them, that's where I work with clients to figure out, okay, with all of these areas, which ones are actually more important to you? And that's different for everyone. And really understanding what their definition of success is. And because that is different for everyone. And oftentimes the definition of success for some people can be very much based on what their parents told them or what society has told them. So really understanding what it is to them for themselves and having that understanding. And I think being able to really understand that for yourself is how you can then figure out what to focus on for the next opportunity.
Earlier in the conversation, you kind of alluded to that you had some kind of struggle with your particular job, and that kind of led you down this road. So, can you speak more to that? What led you to go down the route of coaching and leaving your other job behind?
I started my career out in finance on Wall Street, got burnt out, decided to go to business school and reset my career. Ended up in tech. I worked at Google for 4 years. And while I was at Google, I actually really struggled with trying to figure out what to do next. Because no matter, I was just following the path of, work hard, get promoted, because that's what you were supposed to do. And no matter what I did, I couldn't get promoted, no matter how hard I worked, how the additional projects and the responsibilities I took on, and after 4 years of really working as hard as I could, I actually got laid off due to a reorg where the company decided the team was no longer needed, and that was a huge shock to me because it was my first time getting laid off. And I realized that you have to be the one in control of your career. And so after that, I actually took a year off to explore, did some personal passion projects, travel, and really learn more about myself and figure out what I wanted. And with that, I decided to go back to corporate after my year off, and worked at a few startups. I just thought maybe working at a smaller company would help. But again, this feeling of like something was missing kept coming up. And so I felt like I had exhausted all the options for where I wanted to go. And that's where I decided to work with a coach myself to help me figure out what I should do next, because I really had run out of ideas. And this was about early last year in January 2023. So working with the coach, she essentially helped me figure out what made me feel like the type of work that I was really interested in, where I felt like I could make the most impact. And that's where I felt that the common thread throughout my entire corporate career was this idea around coaching and mentoring people and helping people. And that's where I felt the most satisfied and felt the most fulfilled. And the other thing that I had explored with a coach was this idea of starting my own company. I live in San Francisco, so there's a lot of the startup culture, and I always thought that you needed to have this brand new, innovative idea that no one's ever thought of before in order to start your own company. And so working with her, she pointed out that, that's a bit of a limiting belief. You don't need to have a crazy new idea to start your own company. And so with those two, I'll call it revelations in mind, that's how I decided to go down this path of career coaching, because I felt like I've always been someone where people came to me for advice on their careers, and through the work that I've done in the past, and within my corporate career, it's where I felt really fulfilled and satisfied. And so funny enough, I once I made the decision to become a coach and applied for and started my certification program, I got laid off a couple weeks afterward, and I took it as a sign from the universe to go in on this journey, and that's what I've been doing since.
You said you started at Wall Street, and my mind immediately went to I spoke to another. I don't remember her name. It's been so long at this point, but it was the equity finance, the equity analyst video, which is very, very fascinating. So when you talk about Wall Street, my mind immediately jumped there. And then you talked about Google, and my mind immediately jumped to that is a high stress area. So I'm envisioning like you're going from Wall Street to Google. Talk about jumping from one fire to the next. Jeez Louise. Let's talk about like one of your success stories. If can you give us like a tangible example of someone that came to you, the problem they were having, and how you helped them resolve that problem?
One of my clients, she came to me. She had been laid off from her job. She had been working 80 plus hours, so she was feeling quite burnt out. And she was really just unsure of what to do next. Everything she looked at in terms of jobs felt she didn't find them interesting. She didn't want to do more of the same thing that she'd been doing, but she really didn't know what to do next. And so working with her, we explored what her strengths were, where her passions were, and from a surface level, she had a lot of really interesting passions and interests that, as a multi-passionate, that's a term that's used in the industry where people have a lot of passions, but oftentimes there may not seem to be a common theme or thread from all these different passions. But we dug deeper into that, and there was a common theme across all of them. So we helped her identify what it was about all of those interests and passions that was a common theme to help her figure out what the next role would be that would be able to offer that for her. And so through that, we helped her identify essentially her purpose, what would make her feel like the work that she does felt like meaningful and had an impact. And then really understanding what her priorities were in terms of values, and she used all of that to really think about what her next step was. And one of the things that she often kept saying through our coaching conversations was, anytime I brought up an idea, or an idea she thought of herself, she immediately went into all the reasons why she couldn't do it. And so one of the things I helped her look at was, okay, instead of focusing on the negatives of why, think about the reasons why you could, or if it did work out, what would that look like? And that really opened up her mind to really think about the possibilities rather than focusing on all the negative reasons for why she shouldn't. And all of that essentially led her to wanting to start her own business, and leveraging all of the different passions and interests that she had, as well as the strengths that where she felt the strongest. And essentially, has been kind of working on her own business and feels much more fulfilled and being able to tap into all the different things that she's interested in.
Talking about leveraging things you already know, let's talk about your education a little bit. How has your education affected what you do now? Has it had any effect at all, or not so much?
I went to Princeton, where I felt the most critical skill I learned from that experience was being able to analyze things and really break down problems, and figure out ways to solve that. And so from a soft skills perspective, I feel like that's something I've learned and been able to use and apply throughout my entire career. whether corporate or even now as an entrepreneur. And I also went to Wharton for business school. So another Ivy League. And there, I would say it was definitely the focus was on, again, the soft transferable skills. So leadership, teamwork, communication, and work, how to manage projects. All of that are all skills that are important no matter what career. So I feel like for my education, those have really helped me. And when it comes to the actual like subject matter expertise around specific subjects, for business school, I would say that has been a little bit more helpful, especially now as an entrepreneur. But I feel like the things I learned were much more at a theoretical level versus now as I'm trying to apply that in a realistic way. It's still a learning process, and there's still a lot of things that I don't know. And I would say from that, it's a little bit less relevant. It's been helpful, but not as much as one would think. So I think for my education, it's really been learning how to develop and use those soft skills.
Once someone finds what they feel is success, is that kind of like the end of your adventure together, or do they touch base with you on like a every 6 months or once a year? What's that like after the people get success, whatever that looks like for them?
That officially would conclude our working relationship, but oftentimes people's goals change, or their definition of success changes, or they have significant life changes, like having kids, or that then changes it has a big impact on career. And so they can come back to work with me, or if they take the things they learned from working with me, they can try to apply that themselves. But yeah, I happy to work with people again as things change, and they can obviously reach out back to me.
Alice, whenever I'm speaking with someone on Time We Discuss, I like to give them the opportunity to talk about a project they're working on, a cause they believe in. If they want to talk about more about their business or something like that, I like to open the floor up. So if there's anything in particular that you'd like to discuss, the floor is yours.
Thanks again so much for this opportunity. Really happy to share more about what it's like to be a career coach. And if anything, if at least for listeners, if anything resonates with you and you're interested in exploring more and working with me as a coach, definitely feel free to reach out. As a free resource, I do offer a free career checkup guide. Earlier, I talked a lot about making sure your values are aligned with your opportunity. And so it's a good resource, I think, to help you do essentially like a gut check on your career and figure out if there's something that's misaligned in terms of priorities with your current role, and helping you figure out which of those values is actually a priority for you. And so that guide is available for free, for people to download, and you can download it at bit.ly/time we discuss career check. And I'm sure all the links will be available for reaching me or downloading this guide.
I will get those links for you. I'll make sure I have it correct. I'll put that in the show notes. It'll go on the website. I'll plaster it all over the place, so when people are looking for you, they can easily find you. It's been absolutely awesome having you on Time We Discuss, and we learned what it's like to be a career clarity coach.
Thank you again for having me.